Hi, I am the Efficiency Professor. Today we talk about inflation and the link to fossil fuels. Firstly, what is inflation? Very simply, for most of us, this relates to the cost of food, fuel, electricity, goods and services. This cost of living is impacted by the source and price of energy. As we know, our primary energy source is fossil fuels, and herein lies much of the problem for inflation. Fossil fuels come from the ground. Extraction of coal, oil and gas has caused over 400 million tons of excess carbon in the atmosphere directly as a result of fossil fuel emissions. We continue to pour 87 million tons of new carbon into our atmosphere every day because we use fossil fuels. This adds expense to taxpayers and households to meet climate change. Fossil fuels are traded through global markets but really fall under the control of big companies and powerful actors behind them. As fossil fuels are sold to countries on a global market, there are no price controls or supply controls as such. Finally, fossil fuel products impact every corner of modern society, from fertilizers controlling food production to plastics through to pharmaceuticals. All of these link back to fossil fuels in one form or another, which means there is no consumer price controls or protection for most countries. It does not need to continue. Why? We do not need fossil fuels when we can grow our fuels. See the carbon farming video for more information on this. Agro-energy has almost no emissions, is far safer, far more profitable and completely sustainable when compared to fossil fuels. Why has there been no transition away from fossil fuels then? The answer can be traced to those who want to control the supply and therefore the price of the fossil fuels in the global markets. The global trade in fossil fuels results in inflation, causes many wars, and holds governments and consumers hostage to third-party actors with very different agendas. This is where most economies find themselves today, with no control of inflation and failing food production. It will not improve until control of energy source and price is achieved by the replacement of fossil fuel energy and products from our economies. This can be done quickly, efficiently and effectively. Fossil fuels must be replaced with energy crops grown in our farms. This agro-energy is not a new concept. There are many energy crops and fuels grown already in considerable scale. What is required is that the growing of these crops is expanded globally to decouple from the fossil fuel markets. This requires that they are introduced into lesser developed countries to allow them to develop their own agro-energy resources for a more equitable global energy balance. This is achieved immediately by all fossil fuel incentives and orders being changed to agro-energy incentives and orders. Farmers will simply be contracted to grow these crop fuels in an ever-growing capacity to replace fossil fuels, a transition to sustainability that will not take a decade. This slows and then stops further emissions, giving a transition period out of fossil fuels and into sustainable crop fuels compatible with our current technology. This means less expense for taxpayers and households and a booming agro-energy sector growth in every country. The transition to carbon farming manages and reduces inflation for the long term. Organic carbon farming is only possible with huge volumes of soil fertilizers for each farm. These soils must be of a consistent organic standard for international markets. This quality and capacity gap has now been filled by a new technology developed by Infinity Biological Soils in Australia. Their bioreactor produces optimized, humus-rich, biologically active organic soil fertilizers of consistent food-grade quality in very large volumes. All pathogens and weed seeds are eliminated and all emissions are captured, which enables the bioreactor to process food waste from cities and towns. Even manures and other difficult waste stream challenges now have a solution. All of this from a small and profitable footprint business, which lends itself to national scaling and self-funding very quickly. The enormous raw materials volume required to produce billions of tons of biologically active organic fertilizers has a simple solution in that millions of farms can grow their own raw materials for their own fertilizer needs, just like they used to before chemicals. Farms can simply trade these trees and crop-based raw materials with bioreactor soil centers for new organic soils immediately, which localizes and stabilizes soil production supply and costs, resulting in every farmer, rich or poor, receiving almost free organic fertilizers. The farm cost savings amount to 20% or more as farmers happily put carbon-rich soils back into the ground to rebuild their soils and reverse climate change for all of us. Millions of farmers apply hundreds of tons of soils into their fields annually, achieves billions of tons of atmospheric carbon capture, naturally. This rebuilds water and carbon cycles, reducing climate change costs for taxpayers and households. These agro-energy crops are compatible with current technology, removing more cost for everyone. Most importantly, the reliability of food and energy production relative to environmental or political risks are now well managed, with production costs dropping, translating to reduced inflation. This is a long-term trend as the farm costs, fertilizers and fuels particularly, are now reducing in cost. This simple agro-energy and soils plan offers the only sensible, viable and realistic strategy to reduce inflation in a timely and cost-effective way. Oil, Gas and coal companies should lead this transition to sustainable crop fuels and organic soils, as this will convert their companies into long-term sustainability away from their current unsustainable terminal trajectory and be part of a long-term sustainable economy. The transition is as simple as contracting farmers to grow the energy crops and supplying them with organic soils and soil centers. Economists are encouraged to analyze this agro-energy and soil solution to inflation and climate change. Please do liaise with myself to discuss working papers and practicalities of application and crop data. Policymakers, investment decision-makers, influencers, here is where your attention should be. Infinity Biological Soils is committed to investing as much back into new projects as possible to support the growth of carbon farming and reducing climate change. For bioreactor placement and partnerships, please contact Infinity Biological Soils Limited, Australia. www.infinitybiologicalsoils.com. For more information on energy crops or carbon, please contact me, the Efficiency Professor. For more information for farmers, visit www.wealthyfarmers.net. For more free content, click and subscribe, or join us as a Patreon member to support our soil projects. Big energy or corporate proactive? Want to build your global brand? Sponsor a project. Are you a social media influencer? We have the content, you have the audience. Let's make it happen. Thank you for your time, and we hope this topic has been thought-provoking. Finally, please pass forward this video, as our projects are funded by social media. Remember, knowledge is nothing without understanding and implementation. I provide the knowledge, you accumulate the understanding, and we implement the projects. Thanks for watching another Efficiency Professor Media Production 2022. Another Efficiency Professor Media